You were telling me the other day, and this surprised me, that there are some people in family situations that are victims of domestic violence. And they will not leave that situation unless they are sure that their pet can go to a safe location too, and they will, if the pet doesn't have a safe location to go to, they will stay with the domestic violence situation. You're working with people like that, right?
Sure, yeah. So we have a program called Safe Haven, which is a cooperative program with Unity House in Rensselaer County and Equinox in Albany County. So they are the domestic violence sheltering providers for the people in those two counties. When they intake a person into their shelter, they ask, do you have pets that you want to bring with you? Which is not a question they always ask. We've had this program for about 7 years with them. And now that they ask that question, they tell them you can bring them with you. We will care for those pets. We have a secure private location where those pets can be held, and as we will hold them as long as that the victim of domestic violence is in those programs, which sometimes is 3 or 4 months for them to find housing, not only for themselves but for their animals. And there's a large book of research on this connection. So like we said, people feel like their pets are part of the family, just like you can't imagine someone leaving their child behind with an abusive person. They can't imagine leaving their pets behind. The psychology of victims of domestic violence is something I'm not an expert on, but I have some understanding of. But certainly one of the things that abusers will do is use threats to animals and children to keep their victims in the home. So you might have an abuser say, if you leave me, I'm going to kill your dog. And so they will stay to protect the dog if they don't know that they can bring the dog with them. Same thing with the child. They take total control over their lives. So what we're trying to do is remove that one impediment from someone leaving an abusive situation and giving them a way out. Because often what we're finding is, actually the majority of the time, the animals were also abuse victims along with the people, but the program allows everyone to be safe together.
Is this program for victims of domestic violence and their pets unique to the Capital Region, or is this something all across New York State?
You see it in pockets in different parts of the state. Not every county has a similar program, but there are quite a few across the state and across the country. New York City is a very challenging place to do this sort of thing, and they actually have a shelter where the domestic violence victims can live in the same place with their pets, which is unusual. I think that's the next step for these sorts of programs, is to try to find ways where those victims can keep their pets with them so you don't split up the family. There are all sorts of challenges. Sometimes these shelters have group housing with lots of different people, and are there allergies, and are the pets safe for others to be around? So there are challenges to overcome, but that is what is starting to happen in other parts of New York State and in other parts of the country, trying to figure out how to really keep them all together.
I think a change happened in the country about 10 years ago now, where we have more pet-friendly hotels and motels. Want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, well, I think we're seeing now specialization of places like bed and breakfasts that say, we want you to bring your dog, and they have a dog park, and it's a dog and pet vacation. They're sort of selling this idea that you bring your pet with you on vacation. They're, again, part of the family. They want you to come along. Those hotels are popular destinations. You know, if you're driving across the country and you got your dog with you, that's where you're going to stay. We are the primary responder for our two counties for victims of disaster. So if the disaster occurs and there's a declaration of disaster, of course the Red Cross is the primary responder for people, we're the primary responder for animals, and the first thing that we try to get out to people is, if you're able to stay in a hotel, here are pet-friendly hotels that you can bring your pets to, and you don't have to go to the emergency shelter, which is not as nice as a hotel, let's put it that way. And there's quite a number on that list that we can refer people to where you can bring your pets with you. So I think it's just another piece of that progression of saying, pets are part of the family. We have a bill in the New York State Legislature that's awaiting the governor's signature that will allow restaurants to have dogs on their outdoor patios because people want to bring their dogs to dinner with them. And right now restaurants aren't supposed to do that, but we're starting to see all these sorts of things that allow people to stay together with their pets, and that's our goal, is to keep them in their homes.
This is the 10th anniversary of the hurricane down in New Orleans,
Yep.
and I found it very fascinating at that particular time when you saw rescue buses for human beings, and the bus would not allow the pets, so the person said, nope, I'm not leaving my buddy. I'm going to stay with my buddy.
Yeah, and that was not the first time we saw that. I was actually at the Lamar Dixon Expo Center during Katrina. I was one of the responders, and it was the largest animal evacuation site in the history of the United States. I don't think there's been one bigger since. And there were a tremendous number of animals, and the problem was that they were all left behind in New Orleans, and they were separated from their people, and the vast majority of them never reunited. So these were people who lost everything, not only lost all their belongings, lost their home, couldn't move back to the city where they live, but lost their pets. And we saw a very dramatic example of that on the news, with a child having their pet taken away from them, their little dog taken away from them by a National Guard person, I think. So it was what happened is, not only are the pets left behind, but then the responders to the disaster, our first responders, are putting their own lives at risk to save the people who stay behind with their pets, because people are saying, well, you're telling me leave my pet behind, so it's safe for my pet to be here. Well, it must be safe for me too. I'll just stay. And when you look at who stays, it certainly skews towards the elderly, who have no one else they're living with but their pets. They're not going to leave them behind. But certainly pet owners refuse evacuation orders more than anyone else if they're told not to evacuate. And what came out of that was the Federal Pets Act, which requires disaster responders to have a plan for domestic pets if they want to get federal money for disaster response. And that's why we are part of the response plan for actually 3 Albany, Rensselaer, and Schenectady counties in the capital region. And there was some grant money a few years ago through the federal government and the state to purchase supplies to respond to those disasters. So we have trailers set up that have disaster response equipment, crates and bedding and bowls and everything you would need to set up a temporary animal shelter. So if there were a disaster, for example, in Albany County, the Red Cross would set up, and hopefully, ideally, right next to them, in a separate room, we would set up a place for animals so that people could stay with their animals in the same building or very close by, and they can continue to take care of their own pets, ideally, and then when they're ready to leave, they leave with them. But it's just part of that connection that people have to animals. They're not going to leave them behind. And we tell people, if you go now to look at advice that FEMA has for you to prepare for disasters, they will give you information about preparing with your pet, and in big bold letters it say don't leave them behind, because the responders don't want to have to go back and get them.
One quick question, we're almost out of time. You were telling me about a pet food pantry, and people who love their pets so much will sacrifice and not eat as much as they should to make sure that their pets are well fed. Talk about your food pantry.
So we have a program that distributes pet food to 7 food pantries around the capital region. Last year we distributed 19,000 pounds of pet food. When we started the program, we just thought, this would be a nice way to help out. We get calls from people who say, I'm running out of food and I don't have any money. Can you give me a bag of food just to get until my next paycheck? And we thought a better way to do this is community food pantries, where the people who need it are going anyway. So some pantries just agreed to partner with us. And what we found out that we didn't know, and the pantries didn't know, is that people were taking human food to feed to their pets. So they were taking extra food that should have gone to people, feeding it to their pets, which isn't the proper diet for the pets to eat. So we had this, again, ancillary benefit we didn't expect, that there was more food available to people who should be getting it. Pets are eating the right food, and so the pantries are very happy with the program. We're very happy with the program, and it's a way to keep pets in homes that are perfectly happy in that home.